Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Lopez and I'm going to talk about law and psychology in a Christian worldview. More specifically, I'll talk about how law and psychology can integrate, and then how I believe a Christian worldview is pertinent in regards to law and psychology. First, it is important to understand what psychology is. Landrum and Davis, 2014, mentioned that psychology is great and diverse discipline in studying human behavior. More specifically, it's all human behavior. So the study of all human behavior, not just certain aspects, but emotions, behavior, feelings, all things that lead to behavior. So what is law? The law is crucial in helping the world function in a way in which there is less chaos and destruction in the world. There needs to be a set of rules, laws, or statutes that an individual must uphold in order to prevent unnecessary destruction to people, places, or to things. Can both psychology and law integrate and work together? The answer is yes, they can. So in order to understand how law and psychology can integrate together, I think it's important to understand the biggest difference between law and psychology. So one area in which there is a difference found regarding psychology and law is in the specifics or the timeline. So Zuzukiskin and Cantor state and mention that the law primarily focuses on a case at hand, which gives emphasis to particularities of the individuals involved in the case, whereas psychology is interested in that above process, but more specifically on how it got to that point or what happened in that time that led the individual or the individuals to this behavior. So the law is going to focus on the case at hand itself, and psychology is interested in the whole overall aspect of why and which it happened. How does psychology and law correlate? The main thing it's going to be found and how it integrates together is based on behaviors. Capardis, 2003, mentions that law should be characterized as a key component of psychology because psychology is determined as the study of human behavior, and it is essentially includes law as a crucial mechanism used by society to regulate human behavior. So the end goal for psychology and law is ultimately going to be understanding those behaviors. Capardis, 2003, mentions ultimately the end goal is understanding behaviors in both situations because both psychology and law accept that human behavior is not random, and more specifically, research in psychology correlates to numerous facets of law in practice. So both law and psychology professions understand that behavior is not random. There are certain aspects and certain situations and occasions that predict or produce why a person behaves the way they behave. These all play certain factors and roles into it. There are many areas that law has utilized for psychology. So Allen, 2018, mentions some above ways in which psychology has been integrated into law. So psychologists have been utilized to assess individuals' risk of reoffending. Law has used psychologists' observations, preventions, and intervention skills to minimize harm and control crime. They've also used psychologists to develop behavioral profiles, and they've also used psychology in forensic interviews and interrogations. Allen, 2018, mentions that psychology resources have been useful in interviews, detection of deception, reliability of memory, identification and testimony in reducing the risk of harm and failures of justice. So both law and psychology are going to be concerned with the safety and well-being of others. Kapartis 2003 mentions that achieving justice is the concern of law and lawyers, while the search for scientific truth is the concern of psychologists. So it is important to know that psychologists and people in law are concerned with safety and well-being of others. They're always searching for justice, and they're searching for the truth. Justice and truth can be found hand in hand. So how does the Christian worldview fit in? A way to understand this is to break it down individually, because we already seen how law and psychology integrate together. So we're going to start by seeing how a Christian worldview, how psychology fits into the Christian worldview more specifically. So the Christian worldview is that the foundation for how all creation should be living. This is where we find our foundation. We are created in God's image. Man and female. Genesis 1:27 states we are created in God's image. So what does this mean? We should be modeling in the behaviors of Christ. Okay? 1 Peter 2:21 in the NIV states, "To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his footsteps." So when we're thinking about our behaviors and our actions and things like that, we should be modeling the behaviors of Christ, okay? It is when we decide to disengage and disconnect from Christ, that's when it starts leading to destruction. It is when we disengage from him that leads to destruction or bad behaviors. So how does the Christian worldview fit in law? Law is concerned with fairness and a functioning society for the well-being of all. With that being said, God is the foundation of what justice is. God is just. He's right. He's merciful. He's loving. He's a good God. He is just. He cannot be anything other than just. When we do not listen to the wisdom of God, we become more susceptible to sin. So I'm gonna read a verse by Romans, and you can see the correlation between psychology and law in this verse. Romans 1:28-31, the NIV states, "Furthermore, just as they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave them over to a depraved mind, so that they do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They have no understanding, no fidelity, no love, no mercy." So here in this verse, you can see how the knowledge of God is what keeps us on the right path and on our right behaviors. It's when we disengage from him that causes us to go into sinfulness, which is the evil, the greed, the boasting, the murder, the envy, and these all cause us to go into destructive behaviors. And these destructive behaviors need to have consequences. So this is where our law can be found, because we need to obtain some sort of order. And with all these consequences and with all these wrongdoings, there needs to be justice. So in conclusion, psychology and law can integrate. And actually, when they're utilized together, it can benefit and bring great insight into both of these professions. So my personal area of interest has always been forensic psychology, because I believe that law and psychology are both important aspects in understanding human behavior and functioning. One area searches for justice and the other for truth. So when you have law, that profession is searching for justice. When you have psychology, you're searching for the truth behind things, why mind works the way it does. And in all honesty, justice and truth can go hand in hand, because when you find truth, you can find justice. When you expose truth, you expose justice. They both work hand in hand. And, with anything, these should be understood from the foundation of a Christian worldview, because it is here where our foundation lies to these topics. And honestly, Christ is the foundation of all things. He is the creator of all things. God is above all things. Ephesians 4:6 in the NIV version says God is above all things. So if we have any areas of disagreement in any topics, whether it be psychology or law, or areas in which we do not understand, I think it's important to go back to our foundation, which is Christ and His Word. And in that we can find any area of ethics, morality, justice, psychology, any topics that we can think of can be explained through God's Word. And I think it's important to remember that. And here are my references. And that's all I got. So thank you guys.